Welcome to Inside Style. I'm your host, George Worrell, and thank you for tuning in today. We have a great show today. We are going to talk about public safety, style, and what women are doing in the country and in D.C. We are fortunate enough to have Lindsey Appiah, has been appointed as the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice. Deputy Mayor Appiah began her career in public service as an Assistant Attorney General representing the Department of Children's Services and the Department of Labor in the Tennessee office of the Attorney General, where she managed a team of attorneys and represented the departments of various matters, including state tort actions and federal civil rights actions. In 2012, Deputy Mayor Appiah, again, her career began in the district government at Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, and served in several leadership roles, including Assistant General Counsel, and Interim Director. Deputy Mayor Appiah joined the office of Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice as Chief of Staff in 2021. I present to you and to others who may know her, Deputy Mayor Lindsey Appiah. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I rattled all through that.
No,
but
thank you
these
for
are
having me.
some fabulous accomplishments, but it's deep rooted. We were talking a little earlier about where all of this comes from. Let's talk about that a little bit, about your parents and where you hail from.
So I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts, a townie from Worcester, Mass, which is a very blue-collar place in the middle of Massachusetts. And, you know, when you talk about where I come from, there's a place, but there's always a people. And my people, and what really roots me has always been my family. I grew up the daughter of Richmond and Rochelle Appiah, and I'll slip into a bit of a New England accent whenever I say my mother's name because she is very, very much from Worcester, Massachusetts. But my father's from Ghana, West Africa, came over in his 20s to the United States, to New York City, as many people do, but ended up in Massachusetts where he met my mom. My mom grew up in foster care and was on her own at 16, and so she's tough and, you know, my best friend. But they came together. They've been married 49 years this year, which is pretty amazing in this time, and especially coming from really challenged backgrounds. I think we had a real family code, and the main thing was God first, then family, then service. And for my parents, service looked like we had over 400 foster children over 30 years. I'm one of 4 biological, but always growing up 9 to 15 kids. So really learned that you serve and you give and you open your home and it's not a big deal. So I was very privileged. I was the academic one, the nerdy one, and ended up going on to Brown University, which was such a privilege, and studied public health there, maternal and child health issues. And knew that my parents had opened their home and that was their way of serving. And I thought, okay, I have a Ivy League education. What can I do? I'll be a child advocate. So I came to D.C. in 2001 to go to law school at Georgetown with the intention of becoming a child advocate. And I thought, my dad would always talk about what do you have in your hands, which is really Bible things. Like when Moses was going to go to free the Jewish people from slavery, he was a shepherd. So he had a shepherd rod in his hand. So my dad would be like, Lindsey, what do you have in your hand? And really, it was about letting God use what I had in my hand. And for me, it was law degree and this very privileged education, right? That's really what it was. And so ended up in private practice a little bit, but really wanted to care about the work that I did. And that's how I got into local government service. And it really was, I wanted to do local government because you impact people directly. You get to serve people directly. And I was a very justice person, still am, and like this deep sense of doing what's right and helping to right what's wrong. And so that's kind of, you know, some of the roots of my story and how really my foundation of how I'm here now.
Let me just ask you this. Are you familiar with Legal Seafoods?
Oh, yeah. For Boston, that's a Boston seafood place. Seafood is my favorite food.
I brought that up to say I started my career at Legal Seafoods here at 2020K in 1995. Okay. And I don't know anyone from Massachusetts who doesn't have that as a banner, and they have a very good product.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
that was
the main event. You can get like the where you can actually order like their lobsters to send to people.
Sent to people. Yeah, that was the first that we had ever heard of that.
Yeah.
And it came to Washington. It was like wildfire. My parents are from North Carolina, and as your parents, they've been married 66 years this past June, and they would come and they would love that. But to segue into your first job, so what brought you to Tennessee?
Yeah, so I had been in D.C. about 6 years. I was actually working in private practice, and I thought and it's literally this, I had worked all night, one night, literally, and the law firm looked the same at 9 a.m. as it looked at 9 p.m. as it looked the next day, and I thought, this is fine, but if I'm going to give this, time is a currency, right? And your time is maybe your most valuable currency. If I'm going to give my time and use this currency, my most valuable one, what do I want to do with it? And so I wanted to get into service. I had been in DC 6 years, and it will sound, however, but I had this undescribable pull towards Tennessee, and I didn't know why. And instead of questioning it too much, I'm a faith person. I'm like, well, if there's an itch that I have that will not go away, maybe this is a God sort of nudge. And so I decided to just go. And I literally made a decision. I hadn't even been there. I finally visited when I said I was going to move, and picked a place and moved down. And I mean, there was all sorts of challenges. I'm from Massachusetts. I was moving from D.C. to Tennessee. I didn't have a job. But I was like, it'll be okay, right? Like, it'll be okay. And my parents weren't as sure, but I was like, oh my gosh. Okay.
But that builds something within you. I know when your parents, it does, because if it's something that passion and people are around you, like, oh, I don't know, and you're just still feeling that fire, it builds something.
It's intrinsic sense of what you need to do. And really it was one of the first kind of, maybe not the first, but one where it really was like, okay, like, this is what I believe is the right thing to do. Many challenges down there, but ended up at the Attorney General's office, which was just really, really good work for pennies. I mean, they pay very little in the South to work. But I worked statewide, and so I was in places like Nutbush, Tennessee, from the
Tina
corners.
Turner country,
yes, where I was driving in cotton fields, and that wasn't for me from somewhere from Massachusetts I had seen, but
what did you learn from that experience, seeing the rural part and how people existed, even now, even the time that you were there?
And even going to Appalachia and all of these places where you think about, there's a simplicity to life. There's rooted challenges. I mean, Tennessee is a southern state in many ways. And for me, as a person from the north driving where there's Confederate flags and things, was a reminder of, we have come far, but we have a long way to go. And someone who's working in a space of justice, those are good reminders to have, or they're sobering reminders that, we have some work to be done. And it really was. I would drive into places where there's like large Confederate flags flying, and I thought, I don't know how it's going to go in this courthouse. They'd be like, you're about to be home cooked, right? They're like, I don't know what you do in Nashville, but down here, this is
what oh my
gosh. Yeah. So, but again, you talked about building sort of resilience and a sense of self. I probably looked crazy to these people because we're talking a little bit about style, but I would have like my black power suit, very tall heels at that time, walking into these very small courtrooms where sometimes the only thing in the town that I saw was like a Sonic and a general store. And like it's the Dollar General, right? Like those are the only things, and it's like the Yankee lawyer has just walked in.
Just arrived. I'm here, right?
Yeah, but the I'm here sense of self and holding your head high and doing what you think is right was something that I learned, and I really cut my teeth on, like the law and what it really looks like, because it's wonderful to practice sort of corporate law in D.C., but to be in a small courthouse in Appalachia where I'm representing the Department of Children's Services, where there's abuse going on in a home, and they're sending me down to defend like a law of Tennessee that they're trying to apply to a situation where everyone in town knows so-and-so, or whatever the case may be. That's usually why I was there.
How was that challenge? Well, it's challenging. How were you able to maneuver through the law to bring rightness to that situation or to those situations?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I'll always remember when I was at Georgetown, I went to Georgetown Law, and one of the professors at the end, they always give you kind of a speech at the end of their classes, and you know, there's actually on the top of one of the buildings, I think it's Madonna at Georgetown, it says, justice is the end, law is but the means, right? So I had this sense that this professor said that, you know, you now have a very powerful tool. You, as a lawyer, what you really have is this powerful tool. People will do what you say. You understand something they don't. You will find people in some of the worst moments in their lives, and they have to depend on you in the same way as like a physician. And it is really, really true. And so I learned in those spaces where there were I did a lot of parental terminations where kids had been very badly abused or otherwise, and you know, they're being freed for adoption. I learned that really is the case, that law has the power to transform people's lives in a very, very real way, that there's serious consequences, that it is a very serious thing. A parental termination is akin to a legal death. You are now saying that parent is no longer attached to that child. And that may be right for the child, but we also have to be sober-minded about what that means for the parent as well. The duality, right, and the tensions that are present in the law, but also the power of, if I understand and make a right argument, whatever that looks like,
right,
that I have the ability to impact people's lives in a positive or very negative way, was something that I really believe in Tennessee, in kind of those small courtrooms and big courtrooms. I got to argue all the way up to the Sixth Circuit, which is one step below the Supreme Court, right, on behalf of a state, which is a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Right, to stand there and say, I am here on behalf of the state of Tennessee. What happens here will impact millions of people potentially, right? Like, and so I feel extremely fortunate for that. Like, I think, you know.
But you were and are prepared.
That's right.
And that's something I think we want to emphasize in everything that we do, and our listeners, is that when the call or the knock, you have to be prepared. Yeah. You were prepared emotionally, through education. You were there, and mentally, you knew that you had some backup.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah, and you do. And so that's kind of been my story all the way throughout, because sometimes when you're I was at the districts, when I came to the district, I was at the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, which is the district's juvenile justice agency. I was there 9 years. I was there so long because I'm a person who's like, I don't leave something until I really feel like God has told me to leave, until it's done, right? And I did not understand what that was for. It was preparation for something. I really believe everything's preparation. So, but I couldn't have imagined the preparation would be for the position I'm in now as deputy mayor. I learned so much about people, about justice, about our system in the district, about all the things that impact kind of lives holistically, housing, education, community, all of those things. But at the time, you're like, okay, let me just do the best I'm doing right now to learn, to do my best in this position, to prepare, to continue to hone my skills, never knowing. You don't always know where you're going to end up, but it is all preparation, and it all are adding more tools in your hand, more things in your hand for when that time comes, whenever that may be.
Yeah. So in all of that, I was fortunate enough when I lived in New York, I would come down. I don't know, it was an attraction to me in working in fashion, that I felt that there was a population that couldn't afford my services, but could really use my services, as opposed to the people who could and didn't. There could be other people that could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would come from New York to work at DC Incarcerated Youth. And to go in, and it took you about 30 minutes to get in, to go through all the security, and to see our young men at that time, probably 90% of them of color.
Black.
Yeah. And the principal at the time did a lot of, she would bring people in. She was innovative.
Yeah.
And she had them do like art, and they would have exhibits.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, coming from Tennessee,
Yep.
coming back, and let's, talk about your position of safety and all the things that you do now. How is that going to inspire? Because I think in many cases, even for me as a person who is recovering from alcohol, 29 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There was something that inspired me. There was something that someone said to me, aside from the rules and the law. How do you approach that in what you do?
Yeah, so I believe in redemption. And so I have like all these kind of core values, and like I choose a word of the year and all these different things. Like I think it's a place of creativity and inspiration. My word this year is flourish, which is to thrive, to fare extravagantly, right? And so when I merge all of these things, my passion for justice, my belief in redemption and renewal of all things, and this idea of flourishing, it all kind of comes together in what I do, and people may not see it that way. But I believe in like bringing hope into spaces and using the law and government and all of these things to help uplift hope. And I think sometimes people see the practical of, oh, you have this policy or these different things, but there's the thing behind it is that I believe we can renew. I believe in hope. I believe in really causing things to grow. So I don't know, like it's sort of like a very theoretical and conceptual thing, but in my work, whether it is working with MPD, right, like to help really bring life into some communities where too much death has been. Mm-hmm. That really is what we're trying to do. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, you want to incarcerate? No, we want to bring peace in spaces, right? Or whether it's working with DOC and DYRS to create spaces where people are treated fairly no matter where they find themselves in the system, and that there are opportunities. One of the things that was big, you talk about the IYP, at DOC or Department of Corrections. But at DYRS, we would do the same thing, teach kids poetry and art. They are creative beings. They have capabilities beyond what they're seeing in community or in their neighborhoods, and really giving them an opportunity to tap into that I got to see like how that can change people, right? And so in my space now, have the opportunity to do that at a system level, to build systems that support people from wherever they find themselves, from hopefully preventing people from finding themselves in the system to all the way through when they do find themselves there, in making sure we have fair courts and fair processes and they're treated fairly as best we can in humane facilities, to rehabilitation. One of my agencies is the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens Affairs, to say, listen, you have served your time. We are going to help you find a way to thriving, to finding meaning and purpose in your life. I employ returning citizens in my office, right? Because I really believe in the idea of redemption. Mm-hmm.
It's so. I had the pleasure of speaking at the Ready Center.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was able to share, because many of these things, I was blessed enough that through the alcoholism, I didn't get in too much trouble. But I know what that is of restarting your life.
Yeah.
I know what the fear. What are people thinking? Am I able to do this without alcohol or without peer pressure? Am I able to take care of myself? What are my skills? Just all of that that nobody thinks about. And the encouraging part is that self-awareness, and it's not so much about what we read and all of those things. It's about what someone says.
Yeah.
So I was able to, and I encourage others, that what was meant for evil or what was meant for bad, you make it
for good.
For good.
That's right. That's right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel that's your philosophy, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I really, and we've talked a bit about God. God can use anything. right? Anything that's meant for your destruction can be used for your good. And there's choices you have to make along the way. And so we empower people to make choices. I was able to speak last week. ONE's, the Office of Neighborhood and Safety and Engagement, has a program called Pathways, which is for many primarily young men. We are working on starting one for young women who either have been involved in the system or are at risk of system involvement. And it was, they had on suits, and they came in and met with us in the one of the historic rooms at the Wilson Building that has Frederick Douglass and others, where we meet with dignitaries and others, because that's who they are. And the last word that I gave them is, you're priests, you're royal, right? You are purposed men, right? You are, and we are going to do everything we can to help you walk in that identity. You are not what happened or what you did at your core, what someone told you at your core. You are kings. And so we're going to continue to address and approach you that way and want you to believe it about yourself so you do the same.
And to figure it out, what is my path, what it is that I enjoy, what it is that I was told what you would do for free, what are your gifts, what do you do well, and separating from the herd. Focus on you. Separating, So we talked about all of this, every time I see you, you're always looking absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
That style is part of fashion. Well, fashion is part of style. And how do you incorporate that for yourself? How have you, and for the people that you have to address? How does that work for you?
So one of the things about me is I think it's okay to be sort of a whole person, to be right brain, left brain. Like people, and I think particularly, and I'll say this, when you're Black and a Black woman, like you have these pressures to look a certain way, be a certain way, because if we're going to be in spaces of power or authority and have people respect us, you have to do all of these things. And I really am like, I'm going to be Lindsey, right? Which means that I love fashion. I do. And I also love academia and being that. But like knowing who I am means giving myself permission to be that whole person. And so I do. Like I like have a good time with what I wear and being put together, because it makes me feel like a sort of whole version of myself instead of what people expect, or like really what they would expect someone in my position to be like. I think, and this is no surprise, like it does impact how you feel when you are dressed a certain way. It does. When I want to be casual and in my, cozies at home, that's okay. But like when I'm out, I feel confident and put together and cute. And that's okay too. Right? And that's okay too. And so it's a big, I'd say it's like a big part, because it's about an expression of a different part of myself, and creativity. Like oftentimes lawyers are like walking in spaces in like Black suits, which I do wear sometimes, gray suits. And it's almost like they're trying to take all of, like make us sort of this cookie cutter, or like a blob kind of version to prove that we're serious and smart. I don't have to prove that I'm smart. I am smart. I don't have to prove that I'm capable and that you should respect me based upon what I'm wearing, because you should respect me based upon the things that I do and who I am. But yeah, I try to have fun with it and also be put together. And
because what it does is it opens you up to when you're dressed in what you feel good in. And all of the other things, the basics, which I see, hair, teeth, makeup, all of those things. You can go out and get something. It doesn't mean that you have to spend these elaborate sums, but identifying well-made pieces. Well,
and just so you know, like I don't. So I'm a frugal person. I believe, I'm debt-free right now, and that's a big deal, like to me. And I do Rent the Runway, which I shouldn't promote, but like I don't go out and buy all these. So, I mean, I do that because it's like, listen, until people have this idea about sometimes people in these seats, I'm grateful my loans were forgiven through the public servant loan waiver program from 2 years ago. I had school loans. I'm a blue collar girl from New England who, went to very good schools, but I work in public service. So now I say that because part of the way you can feel good, I do Rent the Runway every month. I pay like $150 to rent these designer pieces.
But that's suggested. I mean, I've done that
Yeah.
with my clients for years, because if you're going to, I mean, it's something that the fashion community has been doing for ages, meaning that if you're an actress or someone in public eye, you could get loans.
Yeah.
Because you're photographed. In your position, you're going to be photographed a lot.
Yeah.
So why make that investment in something that you're going to be photographed in when you can just send it back? And then you can put your money in pieces that you really want to have for longevity at some point.
And it also helps you try different things. Like, I think
And see
until
what
you
looks-
die, life should be an experiment. You should be trying different things. I will try things I wouldn't necessarily otherwise, and I'll be like, well, that didn't work, right? But it's, you know,
Or
it's
this
fun.
did work, and
Or
this
it
is-
did.
yeah.
And maybe I want to make the long-term investment in something like this, and I would have never tried that at a store because it's expensive, or whatever the case
Whatever.
may be. So that for me has been
What do you do for your time? Is it travel? Do you read?
Yeah.
What do you do that says you exhale and it's
Yeah.
Lindsey Appiah's time?
So I'm very, very particular about a Sabbath. Like, you know, there's this biblical concept of Sabbath, and I'm like, God wasn't tired. He wanted to show us we're human. We will be tired. And so for me, I'm very quiet at home. Like, I need that sort of decompression. I love that in this position, I get to be around a lot of people all the time. So for me, a lot of my decompression is reading. I'm nerdy. I do crossword puzzles, and I like to go for walks. Like, I love DC. Like, and I really, really do mean that. Like, I chose this as my adult home. I left, and it was my joy to come back. So I walk a lot of neighborhoods. Right? Like, and I love that. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the city, and what you stumble on, our parks and our museums and all of that
That
is
are free.
wonderful. That
Yeah.
are free. And so honestly, a lot of my downtime is like, let me go out for a
Exploring?
walk and
Yeah.
just see kind of what I come upon, grab a coffee, like, and just relax and breathe. And also it helps me to take care of myself too, like, which is important, like trying to be holistically well and healthy. So it's really that, like, just kind of walking and exploring neighborhoods, and sometimes going for a drive,
Yeah.
out in somewhere in
Somewhere,
Virginia,
yeah.
but
That's
simple
very
stuff.
Simple stuff. Well, thank you. What, in our last minute, what advice would you give someone that's listening, man or woman, who's either restarting, thinking about a career? What advice that you would give them that would just open that door or open their mind, that aha moment?
I would say, like, there's the quote, and it's coming to me, to thine own self be true. And that means really, there's a verse that I used to sort of look to a lot that says, make careful exploration of yourself, right? Like, one of the greatest adventures that you'll ever go on is exploring and figuring out who you are, because everything flows from that. Like, so really spend some time exploring your own heart, because that's like sort of the wellspring of life. And so I would say, worry less, and at some point you get there and you're like, worry less about what other people think or say or otherwise. Seek wise counsel, but spend some real time figuring out who you are, and then let everything flow from that, all that you do. And it sounds very simple, but it's hard work to discover who you are. It takes intentionality. Be as intentional about exploring and discovering yourself as you are about spending time on TikTok or any of these other places.
I love it.
Make it careful exploration of yourself, and the work and the call and the purpose for which you've been put here at this time. Because I believe this. Every person who is here on this earth, wherever they are at this time, is here with purpose and on purpose. So figure that out and then go do from that place of being.
Oh, I can't think of a better ending. You got to come back.
I would love to.
And we'll chat some more. Well, thank you so much. We've been talking to Deputy Mayor Lindsey Appiah. And, oh, God, thank you for tuning into Inside Style. I'm your host, George Royale. And remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. We'll see you next time.